0517 local time. 3 Russian submarines believed the US Navy ship above them had no idea they were there. They were wrong. It took only one short sonar pulse, barely half a second moving through deep water, to change everything. It was not meant to provoke a response. It was not meant to begin a pursuit. It was only a small sound in a vast ocean. But that was enough. In that single moment, the advantage disappeared before the encounter had even truly started. Inside the ship's information center, the sonar display refreshed again. A second return appeared on a different bearing, then a third. 3 separate contacts, 3 different depths, 3 different bearings, all moving with the same slow, controlled patience. No one called them submarines yet. The watch supervisor leaned closer to the screen, saying nothing at first. He waited for the system to settle. He waited for the picture to sharpen on its own. The ship was still using passive sonar, no active signals, no challenge tones, no announcement into the water, just listening. And the ocean was quiet enough to hear mistakes. On the bridge, the ship held her course. Speed remained unchanged. There were no sudden helm corrections, no visible sign that anything unusual had been detected. Behind the vessel, the wake stayed straight and narrow, bright white against the dark blue water. Condition 3, the captain said. His voice was calm, not loud, not urgent, just exact. Below decks, watertight doors cycled. Consoles came alive, key stations filled. There was no dramatic warning, only quiet preparation. Back in the information center, the contacts stabilized. They were not merchant vessels. They were not sea life. They were not drifting objects. Their signatures were mechanical, subtle, disciplined, careful, but not flawless. The first mistake appeared in the timing. One contact adjusted depth by only a few meters. The move was brief, but too clean, too controlled. It looked less like the ocean and more like a trained crew following habit. Another contact held its depth too perfectly, riding the same thermal layer as if attached to it. In water like this, nothing stays that steady unless it is trying to. The third contact lagged half a second behind the others during a small course adjustment. Half a second sounds like nothing. Underwater, it can mean everything. The sonar team began building history, not identity. History, bearings over time, depth changes, speed variations. The important question was not simply what the contacts were, it was what they were doing. And what they were doing did not match the natural rhythm of the ocean. On the bridge, the captain watched the horizon. He did not need to stare at the screens. The ship's posture said enough. Straight course, predictable speed, no visible reaction. Let the contacts decide what to do next. Inside the information center, someone marked the plot. The 3 contacts were now closing. Slowly, patiently, not recklessly, but with purpose. The geometry was too neat to be coincidence. Still no active sonar from the ship. Still no response. That was the trap. The contacts below seemed to believe silence meant blindness. They believed that without an active ping, they were moving unseen through the water. They did not understand they were already being measured. One contact corrected, heading to tighten spacing. Another adjusted to maintain position. The third hesitated, then followed. That was formation behavior, training behavior. The watch supervisor finally spoke. Maintain passive. Log everything. No excitement, no tension, just procedure. The ship made a tiny speed adjustment, less than a knot. Too small to matter on the surface, but enough to change the flow noise around the hull. Underwater, the acoustic environment shifted, only slightly, but enough to force a decision. The contacts responded. One of them reacted a fraction too early. That was when the room became very quiet. The realization was not dramatic. No raised voices, no sudden movement, just the same understanding passing from console to console. These contacts were not simply passing through. They were not watching from a distance. They were positioning. 3 of them. Below the layer. The captain gave no new orders. The ship continued on her line, steady and calm, allowing the ocean to do what it always does. Turn small errors into big revelations. The contacts kept closing, not fast, not careless, but close enough to matter. Somewhere below the hull, in cold, heavy water, 3 submarines had already made their first mistake. They had revealed themselves not through noise, but through intent. And once intent is heard, it cannot be unheard. 0524 local time. The contacts held their pattern. No sudden movements, no sharp closure. Just controlled motion in deep water. Steady enough to look confident, steady enough to look rehearsed. Inside the information center, the plot now stretched backward. Minutes of data began stacking into something more valuable than a single snapshot. Bearings connected, depth changes formed lines, speed variations repeated, a history was forming. The ship remained passive, still listening, still silent. No one wanted to disturb the water yet. This was not the moment to ask questions. This was the moment to let the answers appear on their own. The three contacts maintained spacing with discipline that was almost too clean. Almost. One contact rode the thermal layer exactly. Not above it, not below it, locked into place. That might work in a controlled training environment. Out here, it created a fingerprint. Another contact changed speed in tiny increments. Micro-corrections meant to stay hidden, but timed too evenly. People do that. Water does not. The third contact drifted slightly wide, then eased back into position. A correction without a natural cause. None of it was loud. None of it would stand out to an untrained ear. But on the sonar display, patterns do not lie. They repeat. And underwater, repetition is a confession. The watch supervisor marked the plot again. Track quality improving. No one answered. They did not need to. Everyone could see it. On the bridge, the ship still gave no sign that it had noticed anything. Course steady, speed steady, horizon unchanged. From the outside, it looked like a routine transit through open water. Inside, the geometry was tightening. The contacts adjusted again. That was the second mistake. They believed they were compensating for the ship. In reality, they were revealing themselves to it. The ship's acoustic profile stayed constant, clean, and predictable. It was designed that way. Any new change in the soundscape now was not coming from above. It was coming from below. One contact accelerated just enough to regain position. The increase was subtle, but it added blade noise. Not much, just enough to register. Another delayed its correction, then overcorrected. A human response. A decision made, reconsidered, then adjusted. The third contact held course, acting like an anchor point for the others. And anchor points are easy to find. The sonar team still did not label them. Labels could come later. Right now, they were building a library. What do these contacts do when nothing forces them to act? That is the most honest version of any platform. Continue to log. No active. The captain's voice came through the circuit once. Calm. Final. The ship made another minimal adjustment. Barely perceptible, but deliberate. The hull's interaction with the water shifted again. Flow noise changed. The wake pattern beneath the surface altered, invisible from above. It was not an evasive move. It was a question. The ocean answered. Two of the contacts reacted differently. One compensated immediately, tightening the turn and regaining position with practiced precision. The other hesitated, then followed. That hesitation should not have existed. Not if this was random traffic. Not if this was coincidence. Inside the information center, a quiet understanding moved across the room. This was not a chance encounter. It was structured, planned, executed by crews following doctrine. But doctrine leaves tracks. The ship's sensors kept collecting everything. No pings, no challenges, no signals. Just data flowing into storage, building profiles that did not belong in open water. The contacts were now close enough that their relative positions mattered. Their geometry was no longer casual. It was purposeful. One contact slid slightly deeper to reduce its acoustic exposure. Another stayed shallower to maintain coverage. The third held the center. It was a textbook formation, and textbook patterns can become liabilities. The mistake was not confidence, it was assumption. They assumed the ship did not see them because it did not react. They assumed silence meant ignorance. They assumed that without active sonar, they were hidden. What they did not understand was that the ship did not need to announce what it knew. It only needed to watch how they reacted. On the bridge, the captain looked out over the same unbroken line of sea. His hands rested lightly near the rail. No hurry, no tension. The ship moved forward, indifferent on the surface, decisive beneath it. Inside the information center, track confidence crossed a threshold. No one announced it. They did not have to. The three contacts were now something else. Not unknown, not unidentified, just unspoken. As the plot tightened and the history lengthened, one thing became clear beneath the hull. These tracks should not have existed. And the fact that they did meant someone below the layer had already lost control of the situation. Oh, 5:31 local time. The ocean stayed quiet. That was what made the sound stand out. It was not loud. It did not last. It did not spread across the display like a challenge. It appeared and vanished in a breath. A single tight pulse moving through the water below the layer. Active sonar. Brief, controlled, confident. Whoever sent it believed it would go unnoticed. Inside the information center, no one reacted at first. The room did not flinch. The displays did not erupt. There was no dramatic warning, only a thin line etched into the acoustic record. Clean enough to recognize, rare enough to matter. Then the system finished processing. Frequency, pulse length, repetition interval, all captured. The water here was not helping them. Temperature gradients were stable. Salinity was uniform. The layer that was supposed to hide them had turned into a mirror. The ship's passive arrays caught the return cleanly, exactly as they were built to do. quietly, without announcing success. The watch supervisor exhaled through his nose. Not relief, confirmation. That was active. No one asked which contact sent it. They already knew. The third one, the anchor. It had been a probe, short, cautious, meant to verify position without revealing too much. A calculated risk taken by a crew that believed the other side was not listening closely enough. They were wrong. On the bridge, the captain did not change posture. The ship did not maneuver. There was no answering ping, no visible acknowledgement. Silence held. "Log everything," the captain said. "No response." Inside the information center, data began moving faster. That single pulse gave away far more than the crew below intended. The system matched it against the growing library. Propulsion noise, depth behavior, formation geometry, response timing. The pieces began locking together. Classification confidence climbed, not only because of what the contact did, but because of how it did it. The pulse was disciplined, too disciplined. A trained hand following a procedure written for a different ocean and perhaps a different kind of opponent. One contact reacted immediately after the pulse, adjusting depth to distort the acoustic picture. The move was sharp, precise, and unnecessary. Another delayed its response, then compensated too strongly. The third held position, trusting that the brief probe had been enough. It had not. The ocean remembers everything. The moment they went active, they stopped being a mystery. Not to the system, not to the crew, and not to the analysts who would study the recording later. Still, the ship did not answer. No active sonar, no visible escalation, nothing that would tell the contacts below how exposed they had become. That was the hardest part for them. Uncertainty spread beneath the layer. The first submarine increased speed slightly to widen separation. The increase added noise, just enough for blade harmonics to rise against the background. The second dropped deeper, trying to slip under the layer completely. The move cost it maneuverability. The third hesitated, then held course. That hesitation lasted longer than it should have. Inside the information center, a technician zoomed the display. Another annotated the log. The track history became denser, clearer, and less forgiving with every second. This was not a pursuit. Not yet. It was documentation. The ship made a minimal adjustment. Barely a whisper of speed change. The flow noise shifted again, altering the acoustic geometry one more time. Below, the contacts reacted out of sync. That was the tell. A stable formation reacts together. A compromised one reacts in pieces. They knew they had been heard now. They did not know how well. They did not know from where. And they did not know what would happen next. The captain let the moment stretch. No pressure, no rush. The biggest mistake had already been made. They broke silence. They gave the ocean something solid to remember. Now, everything they did afterward only sharpened the picture. Inside the information center, the watch supervisor closed the log entry. Contact classified. Quietly, no cheers, no gestures, just acknowledgement. Below the hull, 3 submarines began to maneuver independently, leaving behind the geometry that had brought them there. Above them, the ship continued on her line, calm and unchanged, carrying something more powerful than any visible response. Certainty. And once certainty is reached, it cannot be undone. 0539 local time. Nothing dramatic happened. Nothing broke the surface. Nothing changed above the waterline. That was the point. The ship looked the same as before. Steady course, steady speed. No visible shift from the bridge. The horizon was empty. The sea showed no interest in what was happening below. But under the layer, everything was tightening. The contacts were no longer moving as one unit. The formation that had brought them in had dissolved into 3 separate problems, each trying to answer the same question in a different way. How much do they know? The ship did not answer. Instead, it adjusted. Not dramatically, not enough to look suspicious to an inexperienced crew. Less than a knot of speed change, a nearly invisible alteration in how the hull moved through the water, just enough to reshape the acoustic space around her. It was not an escape move, it was geometry. Underwater, geometry does not forgive. The first submarine reacted immediately, increasing speed to maintain relative position. The acceleration was controlled, but physics does not negotiate. Blade rate rose. Shaft harmonics sharpened. The sound was not loud, but it was distinct. Distinct was enough. The second submarine chose the opposite response. It slowed and dropped deeper, trying to disappear into colder, heavier water. The descent cost time. It also cost control. Its turning radius widened, and for a moment its profile stretched across the sensors like a fingerprint pressed too hard. The third submarine hesitated. It held its previous solution, trusting that minimal movement would reduce exposure. In isolation, that might have worked. In an information center full of listeners, it did not. No one spoke. They did not need to. The displays told the story clearly. 3 contacts, 3 reactions, none synchronized. That was the trap. The ship was not chasing them, it was not forcing them, it was simply letting them react to its presence and recording how they did it. Another small speed adjustment. Again, barely noticeable above the surface. Below, it forced another choice. The first submarine accelerated again, trying to recover geometry it had already lost. The noise grew slightly worse. Slight still matters. The second leveled off too early, failing to fully escape the layer. It ended up in the worst possible place. Not hidden, not flexible. The third finally turned, leaving its anchor position behind. The delay was brief, but timing matters. Inside the information center, track confidence rose sharply, not because the ship was emitting anything new, but because the contacts were now writing their own signatures into the water. Every correction revealed intent, every hesitation revealed training, every overcorrection revealed pressure. The ship remained passive. No pings, no visible response, no radio call, only silence, and silence can become pressure. One of the submarines made the decision first. It broke away. A clean turn, a steady increase in speed. Not a frantic move, but a calculated withdrawal. The crew below had accepted what the data was telling them, even if they did not fully understand it yet. The formation was gone. 2 contacts remained. They were closer to each other now, but worse off because of it. Without the third platform, their acoustic coverage overlapped poorly. They interfered with each other's solutions, each reacting to both the ship and the other submarine. The ship did not exploit it in any visible way. It simply continued. Another fractional speed change. Another question asked without words. The remaining submarines answered almost together. Almost. One turned too sharply, the other turned too wide. The timing difference was small. The consequence was not. Their noise profiles separated cleanly. Inside the information center, the picture was complete. This was not control through force. It was control through patience, through physics, through human decision-making under pressure. The captain watched the clock. He did not rush. There was no need. The encounter had already been decided. Below the layer, the submarines were no longer moving tactically. They were moving defensively, trying to leave without revealing more. But it was already too late. They had given away blade rates. They had given away response timing. They had given away formation doctrine, all without a single visible move from the ship above. The ship maintained her course. The ocean closed behind her. Somewhere in the cold water below, 2 submarines continued to withdraw, carrying an uncomfortable realization with them. They had not been chased. They had been studied. And being studied can be far more dangerous. 5:46 local time. The ocean seemed to exhale. One of the remaining contacts did something it should not have done. Not yet. Not here. Not under these conditions. A decoy entered the water. It was clean. Deliberate. Time to create confusion during withdrawal, the kind of move designed to blur tracks and muddy the acoustic picture long enough for a clean exit. In another ocean, under different conditions, it might have worked. Here, it did not. The decoy's acoustic profile appeared briefly, then settled into a pattern that did not match the water around it. Its signature was familiar. Too familiar. A template built for colder layers, stronger gradients, and an older generation of listeners. Inside the information center, no one raised their voice. They did not need to. The system separated it almost immediately. Real contact, artificial contact. One carried intent, the other carried memory. Decoy identified, the watch supervisor said. Logged, time-stamped, stored. The submarine that released it continued turning away, accelerating slightly to increase distance. The acceleration cost it. Blade noise rose again, sharp enough to track. The decoy drifted behind, already losing value. The second submarine did not copy the move. It held its line, uncertain whether to follow the same exit path or break in a different direction. That hesitation lasted just long enough to matter. Below the layer, the formation was gone completely. There was no coordination left. Only separate survival decisions, each made without knowing how much the ship above had already learned. Above them, the ship remained unchanged. No visible response, no active sonar, no dramatic move. Just steady motion. The decoy faded into irrelevance. The remaining submarines finally separated, each choosing a different heading, each hoping distance would erase what proximity had revealed. It would not. The data was already complete. Inside the information center, the displays grew quieter as the contacts widened their range. The tracks stretched thinner, then began to fade. Not because they were lost, because they were no longer needed. The captain checked the time. Maintain course. That was all. No pursuit, no escalation, no declaration. The ship did not need one. Below the hull, the last clear acoustic returns diminished, swallowed by distance and depth. The ocean returned to something close to silence, as if nothing unusual had happened. But something had happened. 3 submarines approached with confidence. 3 submarines made assumptions. 3 submarines left with less than they arrived with. They did not lose a vessel. They did not suffer visible damage. They did not create an incident that could be pointed to on the surface. What they lost could not be photographed. They lost secrecy. They lost ambiguity. They lost the comfort of not knowing what the other side knew. The ship continued on her transit, wake stretching white and unbroken behind her. To any observer, it was just another naval vessel moving through open water, calm and unremarkable. Inside, the logs were closed, profiles archived, timelines preserved, mistakes catalogued. This encounter would not make headlines. There would be no official footage, no public statement, no confirmation that anything unusual had taken place. That is how the most effective encounters often end. Somewhere far below, 3 submarines moved away in different directions, each crew replaying the same quiet realization. They had not approached a blind ship. They had approached a listener. And the critical mistake was not being noticed. It was revealing who they were to someone who never had to say a word.